All right. Welcome to this evening with Keren Vishny. She practices psychotherapy and dream work in Northern Illinois. With over 20 years' experience, her work integrates a Jungian understanding of psyche with a relational approach, emphasizing felt experience and embodied imagination. Keren leads classes and workshops both online and in person. Dreams, embodiment, simple ritual, and expressive arts are at the core of her teaching programs. Keren is a physician and practiced medicine for 10 years before retraining in psychotherapy. She's a founding member and teacher in the Natural Dreamwork Community and serves on the faculty of the Jung Center in Evanston, Illinois. Keren completed the BodySoul Rhythms Leadership Training Program in 2007. She likes to spend her free time in nature, along the shore of Lake Michigan or in the hills north of San Francisco. Keren, welcome. So happy to have you.
Thank you, Jeanette. I'm really happy to be here. And thank you all for coming. Before we begin, I just want to ask if you have a journal nearby or at least a pen and something to write on. At some point, we might take a few minutes just to write down some thoughts and feelings about our experiences today. And just to say, Jeanette and Christina, when we get to some conversational pieces, I might ask you to unpin me so that I can see everybody well. So dreams and spiritual direction is got to be one of the most fundamental topics. How can we not bring dreams in when we work with others who are struggling to make meaning, to make some kind of a connection to a source, however that is named? And so we know that from the beginning of time, dreams have been used as a vessel for spirit. But we also know that people have all sorts of different beliefs about dreams. And one of the biggest challenges, whether as a psychotherapist or in spiritual direction, is how do we walk with another whose belief system may not be the same as ours? How do we respectfully deepen the experience and get beyond the things we already know and believe? What I sometimes call our conditioned beliefs. And that's one thing I really want to address is how we can accompany people. Some people believe that a dream has spiritual messages that come from something other than us. Some will say, well, every part of the dream is a part of us. How do we deal with that? Well, the truth of the matter is we can never answer that question. And maybe we don't have to, because what we can do is we can anchor in our dream, our experience of the dream. And through that experience, we can come not just to the meanings and beliefs that we had, but to something new. So when we anchor in the dream experience, we can let that go and see what the dream offers. And one way to do that is just to take a few minutes to talk about the structure of the dream. So first of all, what I want to say is that a dream is by its very nature relational. We have relationships with the figures in the dreams, and think about the impulse to share our dreams. Even more than the content itself, the very fact that we feel a compulsion to share dreams and have since the beginning of time, whether it's, in spiritual direction or around a campfire or around a breakfast table or with a walk, there's a real impulse to share. And one of the reasons is that when we share a dream, we're giving access to our inner space and our experience in a different way. The other reason that we share, other than that it really gives us a different window and a different kind of presence into relationship, is that telling a dream helps us to go back to the dream. And I'd like you to consider that more than a message, and I'm not saying there aren't messages in dreams, a dream is an experience. You might even say a dream is a place, and it's a place you can return to. And when we return, we can take our waking consciousness and we can recognize what those experiences evoke, the feelings, the imagination, the memories, and new meanings can come. And this becomes especially important if we've had dreams that are difficult, because for one thing, when we go back, we don't have to go back alone. For another thing, we can go back and we can go back in from a more resourced place than we were in when we experienced the dream. Every dream has a dream awareness, what I call a dream eye. And when we enter a dream, we enter a world. That world may be very small. It may be a tiny bathroom stall, or it might be, feel like you're hanging out in the vapor, or it could be very vast. But there's a sense of going into the world and that we can go back to that. And each time we go back, we may have a different experience. Going back requires really just that we slow down. We slow down so that we can deepen our presence, and we may begin to notice things that we hadn't noticed before. We may notice a time of day, the atmosphere. We may notice the person who's with us, what their face is like, the kind of expression, how they're holding themselves. There may be an aspect of the dream that you kind of knew about but didn't pay too much attention to. And when we slow down, we can go into a place of encounter with each of those elements. And then the meanings begin to emerge naturally. I'll give you an example of a dream of my own that came at the very beginning of my first therapy, and how that dream echoed later, and how later returns expanded that, so that it had additional depth. The dream came actually when my therapist went on vacation, and she had recommended that I read a certain book. And some of you may know this book. You can nod if you do. It's Alice Miller's book, The Drama of the Gifted Child. Does anybody know that book? Yeah, one, David. So the book basically talks about how the experiences of childhood impact how we relate as adults, and particularly focuses on that group of children whose parents gave them way more responsibility and expected them to be more mature. The word that's often used is parentified at a young age, and what the impact was. And it's a very, I think, important book, a little extreme in certain ways, but a very potent book. And I read it and I thought, oh my gosh, this is my whole life. And I was so distressed. And I thought, it's not just my life, it's the life of so many people I know around me, and I went to bed really upset. And I had this dream. And in the dream, I was holding my little son's hand in a small gray room, and I was taking him by the hand to a very small fish tank. And there was one fish in the tank. It was a little fish. It wasn't very pretty. It was just a minnow. And we were feeding the fish. And then the next day, I go back to feed the fish with him. And all of a sudden, the scene shifts. And instead of being in a small gray room, we're outside. And it's this vast park. And it's this huge fish tank. And the fish tank is filled with fish, and it's night, and they're glimmering, and there's a whole crowd there looking at it. And I think, wow. And I think, oh no, how am I going to feed all these fish? And there was a figure there who said to me, the fish have been fed all along, and they've been there all along. And then I woke up. So you can imagine from a place of beginning, that sense of going from something small to vast, that sense of awe, that there was something afoot that was more than anything than I could possibly imagine, and how comforting that was. And in that space, I had a different sense for myself of trust of what could happen. But I want to point something out. I completely bypassed that first part of the dream. Didn't really deal with it. That's the first thing. But it gets even better. So later, and I worked that with the therapist, but it was at the beginning and we didn't go back. When I went back into the dream, I realized, first of all, that I was pulling this child, and talk about the hurried child. And it really was, in some ways, a reenactment of what my experience was, and hopefully not, but possibly what I could potentially do with my own children. Layer two, I didn't really get that, even though it was right there. Now, fast forward 2024, 2025. I'm writing about the dream, and I just happen to be reading a book some of you may know by James Hillman called The Soul's Code. And in that book, he talks about he mentions the drama of the gifted child, the book, and how he has a very different perspective, and how maybe what we experience is part of our soul's code and what we need. And then I went back and looked at the dream because, in effect, the dream was saying the same thing. The dream was saying there's another reality here other than this book. Yes, we have to deal with the pain of growing up. There's a lot of work we have to do, but there's a whole other perspective. And so here was a dream that opened up over time. I was able to access that because I went back into the experience of the dream. If I had treated it as just a message, which I kind of did at the beginning, it wouldn't have had the kind of resonance, the echoes. It wouldn't have been the source of strength that it was. Not all dreams are big. Well, other dreams are very small, but oftentimes when we go into the experience, we are surprised by how much it holds. And I want to take a minute to talk about difficult dreams, because there are times and people who have dreams that are very difficult, and some of those are directly related to difficult experiences, and sometimes not. And what I want to suggest is that when we go back into those dreams and we experience it in the company of another, it can be a very different experience. And because we are at that point walking in two worlds, the world of dream and the world of waking, we have a chance to do something different. It may be to leave. It may be to stand up to a figure. And sometimes what we realize as we go closer is that that person isn't the scary person we thought they were. That the dream figure is not a replica of the person who was difficult earlier in life. And so we have to remember that sometimes the way through healing is that we experience a tincture of something and then recognize the way it is not the same. And as I speak this, I'm responding to part of a chat message that I didn't completely see because I've been talking to all of you. But I just want to state that as a possibility that when we go in, we can have a different experience. I'd like to pause here and just say that the end result of this isn't necessarily about one meaning, that it's about developing a capacity for deeper presence, presence to ourselves, presence to other people, and presence to the world. That when we go in and allow ourselves to be touched by these experiences, then we develop the capacity to be deeper in relationship without necessarily having to fix or change. And we develop a lot of compassion for others and ourselves. And that, rather than one specific meaning, is sometimes the greatest gift that our dreams can give us. So I'd like to pause here, and Christina or Jeanette, could I ask you to unpin me so that we can continue in conversation as a community rather than as me on a stage, and just ask for comments or thoughts, questions that any of you may have about anything that I've said so far. Okay. Is there any way in which this is the same or different than how you've approached dreams before?
I'll just say thank you for your final comment there. I wrote this down. I want to hold on to this. I need to reflect on it, so I'm not ready to kind of add any commentary yet, but that the end result isn't necessarily a deeper meaning, but a deeper capacity for presence. Wow, what a line. So thank you.